To talk about recovery today, and there are many people in the room, as Matt said, which means there are probably, boy, it's hard for me to do two things at once, just ask my wife, probably lots of people in this room who have been through some kind of 12-step program. And I applaud you for that. It is not easy to do that, to show up at a meeting in the first place, to come back to that meeting and continue to stand up. Because every time you have to introduce yourself, it's admitting what you are, what you're struggling with, what's going on in your life. Hello, my name is, you've heard that before. If you haven't been in recovery, you've heard that before. In recovery, you've said that. Hello, my name is, and and you share what it is. You're very open, you're very real. It takes courage to do that. I applaud you for that. Years ago, Dennis Green gave me a bunch of these life recovery Bibles, and they have been a resource that I've handed out to people who have gone through and struggled with addictions. And so I've handed out, I don't know how many, I can't remember, I'm down to 2. I know he gave me like a box of them. I'm down to the last 2 of these. They're really cool Bibles. So I went to this Bible, I pulled it off my shelf, and by the way, if you want one of these for somebody, for somebody that you're struggles with addiction of any kind, these are free. Just ask me. I'll give them to you. I want to warn you, though, when I went to this particular one, so the last 2 sitting on my shelf, when I went to this particular one and pulled it out, I wanted to see what the commentary said on the Matthew passage I want us to talk about this morning. And so I went to open it up to Matthew, and I was still in the Old Testament. Kind of surprised me. I thought I'd turned far enough. So I turned further, and I was still in the Old Testament. And so I turned all the way to the back, because this is crazy. Why am I still in the Old Testament? And where Revelation should be is where Genesis is. And so I'm like, okay. And so I went to the very front where Genesis is supposed to be and found Revelation. This Bible is printed completely backwards. When you're reading it, you would read down the page. When you get to the end of the page, you got to go to the left side, and then to the end of that page, you got to actually turn left. It took me a while to actually find the passage I was looking for, because I kept wanting to turn right when I was Matthew. And can you imagine if this was one of those Bibles that I had already handed out to somebody that was actually going through an addiction? They'd open it up going, my mind is already blown. So if you do want this, you can have it, but don't do it for novelty's sake. Do it because you actually want to use the Bible. All right, so we are going to talk about recovery for this reason. I believe, now we're going through this series I'm in, we want to be fully devoted to Jesus. That's the idea. That's why on the cover we have all these wonderful, cute pictures of our church family saying, I'm in. I want Jesus totally. I'm tired of just being, like going through the motions. I want to do this thing right. I want to be all in. That's the idea. And so as we do that, I think we just need to all kind of admit we need recovery. It's not something for just a few people. I think all of us need to go through some kind of recovery program. And now you may be thinking, wait, Jeff, I don't have like a chemical addiction, but you probably have an addiction to something, right? There's all kinds of things you can be addicted to. You ever find yourself, the tablets are so popular now, you ever find yourself not able to stop? Just thinking about that game, you got to play one more level. You ever watch a show on Netflix, Amazon Prime, one of those channels, Hulu, and one was just not enough. Neither were 17. You needed the entire season in one sitting. And you can't wait to watch it again. And you're thinking, okay, so you kind of see that maybe there are things that control you that are not necessarily what we'd call a chemical addiction, but there are all kinds of things you can be addicted. You can be addicted to food, you can be addicted to sex, you can be addicted to image, you can be addicted to likes on your posts. You could be addicted to a lot of things. But even if you're out there like, okay, Jeff, I don't think there's anything that really controls me. I think all of us have a sin-scarred heart. I think there are things that we have done, because sin itself leaves a mark. It does not just come into our life and go out of our lives and like, okay, I'm done with that. I'm never going back to, I'm good. I'm clean. And yet, you can't just walk away saying, but I'm also healed, because there's damage done and we need recovery. That's what recovery is. Let's recover from this. Let's grow stronger. Let's get better. We need to recover. So that's what I want us to talk about. I want us to go back where we were last week. I know we're going through the Bible, but we kind of slowed down in Matthew. That's why in your Bible reading plan, we've already passed through Matthew, because it wouldn't take long to get through Matthew, and now we're doing some Psalms just so we can stay here a little bit longer, if that's okay. Because if we're going to be all in for Jesus, don't you think we ought to stop in a section that talks about Jesus and camp out a little while? And especially talk about this Sermon on the Mount, because I think this sermon really helps us to focus in, narrow in on the heart. And now, last week, today, next week, we'll talk about the Sermon on the Mount. I want to talk about how to recover. And as much as I really appreciate what AA has done in the 12-step program, and it's amazing, it has helped so many people, I have great respect. There is a recovery program that predates AA by about close to 2,000 years. I mean, Jesus said it. It's Jesus' recovery program. He didn't have 12 steps. He had 8 steps. I want to show that. I want to share his recovery process. Let me review the Sermon on the Mount, because I did a huge overview last week, and I want to sum it up just this way. Jesus really hits hard in the first chapter on this idea that you can know some things about the truth of God. But that's good. We need to know. We need to study. We need to sharpen each other. We need to make sure that we don't have false doctrine. You can know some things, but don't stop there. This is not where our faith is developed, in what we know. And there's some people that can be very, very proud of what they know and share it and post it and tell other people you're wrong. And yet what needs to happen is it needs to come into our hearts and affect our lives. We need to wrestle with the truth long before we share it with other people. That's why Jesus said, hey, you need to deal with the plank hanging out of your own eye before you deal with the speck in your brother's eye. So if you're going to be a teacher, if you're going to be an instructor, if you're going to be a leader, if you're going to be a discipler, then you need to make sure that the truth that you so easily can share with somebody else, this is how you should live, is first of all pointed at your heart, working on your heart. You need to become this truth. Then he goes on in the next chapter and he talks about all these acts of righteousness. There are things that you do, and this is so important. You should. I mean, he talks about things like prayer and fasting, and we could spend some time on these things, talk about what in the world is that about and how should we do that. But what Jesus does is he's giving examples quickly, all these righteous ways to live, he's talking about how you're supposed to have that heart that's being changed by the truth of God and lived out and affecting other people's lives. And so he says, if you're not doing it for the right reason, if in your inner being, who you're becoming is not what is motivating you and driving you, and you're just doing religious activity because you think it makes you look good before God or look good before others, it's meaningless. It's got to actually come from a heart that is changed, a heart that has good intentions, that desires to do good for the right reason, for the glory of God, not for self. And he hits that theme hard here. And so, all of this would fit together, and it would make this no-be-do diagram with be in the middle, and who we're being in our inner being is what matters most to Jesus. Last week, I skipped over the very first part of the Sermon on the Mount, because the very first part of the Sermon on the Mount is so rich. I wanted to give you an overview. I want to go back to that first part, because that first part has to do with our inner being, who you're supposed to become, what you're supposed to be like. And that word being is from, that word be is a part of the attitudes you're supposed to become. This is who you're supposed to be. And so we call this section the Beatitudes, the attitudes you are to be. It's these attitudes that actually form the steps. These are the steps of Jesus' recovery program. The Beatitudes are Jesus' 8 steps of recovery. Let's go through them. So you have the first one. Let's set it up. Now, when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on a mountainside and sat down. That's why we call it the Sermon on the Mount. His disciples came to him, and he began to teach them. He said, and this is the first step, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." What's interesting is 2,000 years later, all the 12-step programs begin with this concept of poor in spirit, admitting that you have made a mistake, that you sin, that you have a struggle, you are not right inside, and you're powerless to change it. You've come to that place of realizing, I have a poverty of spirit. I don't have what it takes to actually do this thing right. I'm broken. It's poor in spirit. And it is like standing in front of a group and saying, hello, my name is, and I'm an addict. Maybe you don't stand up here and do that, but you should stand somewhere and say it. It needs to be said. Paul, long ago, gave his own version of it when he said, "For I know that good itself does not dwell in me, that is, in my sinful nature. For I have the desire to do what is good, but I cannot carry it out." He's admitting his own sin. And this is where we have to begin. And so, every one of us has to ask the question, what is it that I'm wrestling with? What is it that I'm struggling with? And sometimes we can go days, sometimes we can go weeks, not self-examining ourselves. And what happens is we become pretty cold in our hearts because we're not letting the truth of God work on the area that we're actually struggling with. And the reality is we all struggle. And so this is so important to work through this. The next step then is mourning. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. And the idea is that if you have come to the place where you recognize, I've messed up, I've sinned, I've got this problem, we should actually feel it. It should affect us. We should feel the weight of what it has caused maybe others, or the weight of what it's caused our relationship with God, or just the weight that it has caused ourselves. It should be something that means something to us. It should not be something that we quickly justify away or push off or just say, I'll get through this, I'm okay. God wants us to go through the steps, and He wants us to mourn our sin. And this is so important. David himself, if you remember when David was confronted by the prophet, and the prophet said, "You're the man," and David realized that he had sinned greatly in what he had done, murdering a man and taking his wife, and so he cries out, "I've sinned against you, God, and you alone." And then he writes these incredible psalms, and if you read these psalms, you can hear the mourning of his heart. He cries out to God for the wrong he has done. The next step then would be, blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. And meek is often confused with weak. Jesus is not saying, blessed are you if you are weak. This is not weak at all. In fact, Jesus was considered one of the meekest persons who ever lived, and Jesus was not weak. He was strong. It takes great strength to be meek, because meekness is strength surrendered. So if I'm going to be meek, I'm going to recognize that I could lash back at, or I could stand up against, or I have the resources to fool everybody in the lie I concoct to cover up my sin. I can hide this away. I can ignore that. All of those are weakness. Strength is surrender. I'm going to take everything that I am and everything that I can, and I'm going to lay that down at Jesus' feet and realize that His way is better than my way. Even though I want to try to solve this myself, I have to remember I'm poor in spirit. I can't do it. I've cried over this. I cannot solve it. I surrender. It's very, very hard to do. It takes strength. Meekness is strength surrendered. And it leads us to the next one. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. And here's why. If you have a child, you understand this. When a child has messed up and you call them on it and you correct them. Okay, when a child messes up, okay, we got it? And your mama's called you on it. Your response a lot of times is, and I'm a prophet, so I'm going to just say what your response is, okay? Your response a lot of times is, okay, fine. Am I right? Am I close? Yeah. Okay. All right. Good, because that's surrender. You've obeyed, but you haven't yet gotten here, have you? You haven't actually hungered and thirsted for mama's right teaching. You still want to do it your way, even though you do it mama's way. Am I right? Yeah. This is even harder than meekness, but this is the key to the entire Beatitudes. Here's the key. Get yourself to the place where you're not just obeying God. Get yourself to the place where you actually want to feel and become everything that God knows is true and right, even though everything in your body wants to go in a different direction. But what feels right is this. And God says, no, but this is right. And you say, okay, I'll do that. Hungering and thirsting, though, for the rightness of God, to get to that place where I want to be different. This is why you have to work through these steps. It's a process. Okay, so let's review. This is halfway, and this is the pivotal one. This is the most, in my opinion, this is the core. You get here, you've gotten to the core of what we are to become. From this point now, it's taking it and actually living right, doing the acts of righteousness. So up to this point, what we have is poor in spirit. I'm broken. I can't fix this. I'm powerless to fix this. I feel the weight of it. I'm so sorry. I am going to surrender. I'm not trying to cover it up. I'm not going to justify this. I'm not going to fight it. I'm just going to give it. God's way is right. I'm going to do it His way. And then I'm going to hunger and I'm going to thirst to actually agree with God's way, to actually love His way and to do it His way, out of a being that's changed, not because I'm just obedient. Obedience is so good, but it's just the beginning. Obedience is the first step. Then becoming the very teachings of, almost as if you're hungering and thirsting for the very bread of life that Jesus is, and thirsting for the very spring of water that Jesus is. You want to become Jesus. You can't really become Jesus, but you can become Jesus in being His hands and feet and doing the acts of righteousness to others the way Jesus would. Becoming fully like your Master. All right, so this leads us to the second half. Let me just sum up the first half by saying this is getting yourself right with God. It's maybe an overgeneralization, but it kind of helps us see that this column is about getting yourself right with God. These, by the way, are on the back of your bulletin insert. You've got the Beatitudes written on the front. On the back, I've given you them listed in chart form in two columns, and the two columns are very important. So the left side is getting yourself right with God. The right side is getting yourself right with others. You're taking what you are becoming, and now you have to put it into action, because Jesus says it's not enough for you to love God with everything you've got. You've got to love others as yourself. So somehow, if there are no others, you don't have to worry about that. If you were alone, you wouldn't have to worry about the right side, but the problem is there are others, and when there are others, there's going to be people that upset you, and that's why the very first one is, blessed are the merciful. You got to be merciful to others. Ugh, that's hard. For they will be shown mercy. Well, I have to be honest with you, I don't think you can be merciful to others unless you get this side of the equation right, especially that first one. When you think about that being poor in spirit, that poor in spirit means you recognize you have issues. Hi, my name is Jeff, and I've got problems. When I get to that place where I'm surrendering, or where I'm confessing, where I'm admitting I have problems, it's a lot easier for me to be merciful to others who have problems. Isn't it? Isn't that true? When you recognize your own mistakes and your own weakness, Isn't it easier to excuse or to give mercy to the weakness in others? So after you start to put these into practice, because you cannot just work on yourself. You won't get there by just working on yourself. You have to begin to work these attitudes out into others. You actually have to use them. You have to do the works of righteousness. So merciful is followed up by this one, blessed are the pure in heart. Now this one is the second one that is really confusing. Meekness confuses us and pure in heart confuses us. And the reason pure in heart confuses us is because we think it means you have to be perfect. Isn't that what it sounds like? Purity? Morally pure. Blessed are you when you're morally pure. Okay, I want you to raise your hand really, really high if you have somehow, through your years of living, have escaped any sin at all and are morally pure. Go for it. Jesus said to those standing around the woman, he who without sin can throw that first stone, and every one of them walked away. At least they were honest at that point. We're honest too. Not one of you raised your hand. Because all of us, we're not there. In fact, why would we even work through this if we were already there? We wouldn't need to. Jesus is not saying, hey, this is attainable. You can have a pure heart. You need to work on it. Work on that pure heart. What actually is going on here, this is in the second column. This is in the list of what we are to do for others. This is not about purity in your morality, because that directly contradicts the admitting I'm poor in spirit. I'm poor in spirit. I'm not going to walk around saying, I'm poor in spirit and I'm pure in heart. The reality is, I'm poor in spirit. I'm going to mourn over that. I'm going to surrender that. I'm going to thirst for God's way. I'm going to start living out these acts of righteousness by being merciful to others. And I'm going to do it the best of my abilities with pure motives. Pure in heart means I'm going to have right motives. I'm going to try my best when I'm dealing with others who have wronged me, who have hurt me. With other people, I'm going to do my best to live this out with right motives, pure heart. And it's hard. In fact, it requires you to mourn over your own sin. It's through that process of feeling the full weight of what your sin has done that you actually are it's almost like the tears are washing your heart. Because as you feel the full weight of what you have done, you recognize that there are dark places in you. There are places where you hide motives and sin and secret intentions that you didn't even realize were there. You do things, and I do things for the wrong reason, and until we start to really mourn over our heart, do we realize that there's even blackness there hiding out in that heart. And when you have felt the weight of your own sin, you are much slower to add more weight to it by having ill intentions towards others. You will do whatever you can as you cleanse that heart to keep it from having hiding places for bad intentions. So if you're going to be merciful to others, you have to have the right heart towards others, and it logically leads to this one, the highest form, the peacemaking, highest form of our good intentions towards other people. This one is so hard. In fact, it put Jesus on the cross. Jesus came to bring peace to mankind with God, and they nailed him to the cross for it. Peacemaking is the most beautiful thing. That's why he says you'll be called children of God. That's a high calling. If you would truly desire the best intention for another person, then it's reconciliation, because when you go back to this list and you look at it, peacemakers are certainly ones who are merciful first. But you and I know it's easier to be merciful to a person than it is to be a peacemaker with them. If somebody has hurt you and wronged you, you can say things like, I forgive you, now get lost because I never want to see you again. Am I right? And here he's saying, I want you to be a peacemaker. Oh, no, please no. Right? I mean, that's what you're saying. I have to be a peacemaker with that person. I would like to forgive them and forget them. No. We're supposed to forgive and forget sin. We're not supposed to forgive and forget people. I don't mean forget like you can actually take it out of I mean don't hold it against them. Oh, this is difficult stuff. But these are the steps. Do you realize that in like a 12-step program, now there's more steps, but they basically cover the same things Jesus is covering here. There's a whole section of steps that have to deal with how you treat and deal with other people and seek forgiveness and reconcile. Woo! You want to get well in a recovery program, you've got to make amends. If you want to stay sick, you just go on keeping that bitter heart, keeping them away from you. Blessed are the peacemakers. By the way, it requires meekness to be a peacemaker. Because here's the deal. I don't know about you, but when I am not meek, and that may come as a tremendous surprise to my wife that there are times I'm not meek. She's like, what? What are you talking about? No, I know that. When I'm not meek, that means that I want my way. And I want it now. Anybody struggle with that? Julie, you ever struggle with that? Just a little. I want my way, and I want it now, and I'm right. Let's add that to the list. Should I keep going or just stop there? Well, that's good. Meekness is like, I want it my way, I want it now, I'm right, my way is right. This is what meekness is. And I surrender that. If you get your way, you can't make peace, can you? But when you surrender it, that's when peace comes. That's when peace comes. All right, the last one then in our list is, blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And this whole thing has been bookmarked by this kingdom of heaven thing. It starts off with, blessed are those who are poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. It ends with, those who are persecuted, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And what that means is that these are the very attitudes of the people who live in God's kingdom. Remember the prayer, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. The idea is that we, if Jesus is on the throne of our heart, are under the kingship of Jesus Christ. He is the king that is ruling. We want the kingdom of heaven to rule here on earth. That's what the church is supposed to be like. Can you even imagine how beautiful it would be if the kingdom of heaven actually looked like the Beatitudes of Christ? This is what it is to be the salt of the earth. This is what it is to be the light of the city of the hill, on the hill. This is who we're supposed to be. Now, this one is a tough one. Blessed are those who are persecuted. How many, let's show of hands, how many actually enjoy persecution? Nobody. Who would actually do this? Why is this in our list? Why did Jesus end with, blessed are those who are... Well, I gave you a hint to why it's in the list, because when you actually strive for the righteousness of God and you work through these, especially when you get to peacemaking, you end up on the cross. Because that's what Jesus did. Jesus was merciful to sinners. Jesus had the right intentions and motives. Jesus came to bring peace between God and man, and Jesus was crucified. And Jesus said, if they crucify me, they will crucify you. If they kill me, they will kill you. It's not a very uplifting talk, but that's the talk he gave us. Thanks, Coach. Let's go play. Persecution, it's not something you ask for. What's interesting about this one is it's different than the others because it's not actually persecution. That's going to come when you live against the pattern of this world. When you live rightly, what you do strive for isn't to be persecuted. You don't ask for persecution. You know what you ask for? You ask for the righteousness of God, to be hungering and thirsting and desiring, wanting so badly the very righteousness of God. And when you do these things, you're persecuted. In fact, that's the very language that he uses. Look, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, and then the parallel, blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness. I want so badly to live like you, Jesus. And he says, count the cost, make sure you're ready to follow me because it's not going to be an easy path. You are going to be persecuted for your beliefs. It should not surprise you. Don't think that it's, oh, look, what do you know? I'm persecuted. This is terrible. I didn't expect this. No, expect it. If you're going to live the way God has designed us to live, to become what Jesus has designed us to become, to be in here what you truly are supposed to be, if you work through these steps, it's coming. And he says, rejoice because you're a witness to the world by the way you respond, by turning the other cheek. You become a testimony to the world. And more people have been won to Jesus Christ because of how they responded to various forms of persecution. So, there you have it. There's the 8-step program to recover your heart. So what do you do with this? What do you do with this? I think that one of the mistakes, and I got to be very careful how I say this because it can be taken wrong. I think one of the mistakes we have made as we have tried to teach what does it look like to be a follower of Jesus. I think we have given people the idea that if you believe in Jesus, all your troubles will go away. If you believe in Jesus, your heart will be healed, and you will, it's going to be amazing, and you get to go to heaven too. Throw that in. That's a good deal. Why is it then that Jesus stopped people and said, foxes have holes, and birds have nests, I have no place to lay my head. Are you sure you want to do this? Count the cost before you follow me. It will change your world. It'll rock your world to follow me. I don't want you just to go into this lightly. Now, it's the best thing you could ever possibly do, but it's going to cost you. I think we've done a disservice to just say, hey, you follow Jesus, everything will get better. The reality is, we're taught that the truth of God will set you free. Why is it then we ignore so often the truth of God? We just say, well, Jesus is the truth I need to hold on to. Why don't we take his teachings for real? Why don't we treat them like they truly are the transformative, powerful Word of God that does surgery upon the heart, that divides bone and marrow, that actually, soul and spirit, that can change your heart, that could actually make you become who he's designed you to be. Why is it that we sign up to follow Jesus and just throw in the towel of the power of God who could actually transform us because we just think, all right, I'll just go on with my life and I'll let Jesus fix me. Jesus wants to fix you. He's given you the truth to do it. When Paul said these words, I love these words. He said, whatever you have learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, he can't seem to emphasize this enough, can he? Put it into practice. Do these things. Don't just listen to these things and know, I know the truth of God. No, let it change your being. Don't go through the motions. I do the things of God. No. Do them as an act of worship and let it change your heart. It's supposed to change you. It's supposed to grow you. This walk with Jesus is a constant, daily, disciplined activity with God. It's not about saving you. He saved you. He died on the cross. And yet Jesus does say to us, take up your cross daily and follow me. It's daily going through the process of dying to self. This isn't for your own salvation. This is for your heart to recover. Die to yourself. I'm a sinner. That's a dying moment. I struggle with. That's a dying moment. I'm feeling the weight of. I'm crying over. This is a dying moment. I surrender. That's a dying moment. Wanting his way, not just to obey him, but actually to want to change, to become like him, to have the heart of God. That means giving up myself fully. That's a dying moment. And I guarantee you, putting these into practice hurts. It's a dying moment to be merciful, to have the right intention, to seek peace. It hurts to be persecuted. I don't think I need to explain that one. It's dying moments. This is what he calls us to. Take up your cross every day. So maybe you practice it every day. Maybe there's a different one you need to focus in on each day. But you, in a sense, always have to start with admitting who you are. That's why our I'm statement does just that. Now, this I'm statement, if you're new, this may seem kind of weird to you. For this year, as we go through I'm in, we're doing this kind of fun thing of putting, it is fun, right? Okay, don't answer. We're putting the I'm statement at the bottom of our bulletins. There's a place for that. If you're doing the reading plan, there's a place for it there. And it just reminds us what we talked about. This week's is kind of weird. Normally I'll just say I'm, and then we'll have some words after this. But this one's weird because I need to move the I'm down. It doesn't come first. And there's not a lot of room in your little box, so you'll have to write small. The I'm statement for this week is this. You might want to change the name to your own name. There may be a few in this room that can keep it the same. Hello, I'm Jeff. I'm a sinner. And I struggle daily. And I'm asking you to join me in working on the heart. Let's recover together. If you are sitting here thinking, okay, I don't really know Jesus. I was kind of thinking about maybe I'd come this morning and find out a little more about Jesus and then maybe talk to somebody about a relationship with Jesus. But I'm having doubts now because Jeff just stood up there and said, if you live the way Jesus asks you to live, you will be persecuted. That doesn't sound very fun. Why would I do that? I want to answer that simply by a statement. You don't know me if you're new, so it's going to be hard for you to trust me on this. It is hard to live the way God asks you to live. It's the hardest thing you'll ever do. It hurts like crazy at times. But it's the only way to live. Every other way that we try to live and every other path we try to take leads to, Jesus says to himself, it's a broad road, it leads to destruction. It doesn't lead to anything fulfilling. It doesn't lead to anything that has joy. It's empty. It may be pleasureful in the moment, but it's empty. Yeah, this is hard. This is why Jesus said, count the cost. But Jesus didn't want them to walk away. He just wanted them to know what they were getting signed up for. I don't want you to walk away. I want you to join us and live a way that's counter to the world. But as Jesus himself said, so freeing, his truth will set you free. It is how you were designed to live. So if you don't have a relationship with Jesus, I want to invite you to come forward. We're going to sing a song. It's during the song. You just step out of the aisle. You just come on up here, and I'd love to introduce you to Jesus. Maybe you need to rededicate your life this morning. Come on up here. If you have other decisions in your bulletin, you can check, I want to be baptized, or I want more information about, what it means to be a member and all that. I'd love to sit down and talk with you. I'll follow up on that. If you know you're ready, you just come on up. We'll baptize you today if you're ready. So I'm going to ask that you stand, and we are going to pray, and then we're going to sing. It's during the song. I want you to come. Father God, you're an awesome God. Your way is right. Your way is good. Your way is amazing. Your way is hard. And it's going to take a lot of strength for us to live full-hearted. I pray that you will help us in this journey, that you'll help us to work through the process, that we would actually take seriously these words of your beatitude, that you weren't kidding. This is the way to live, and find tremendous joy in it. All the promises that this is what the kingdom is like. This is what heaven itself is like. This is what it is to be filled. This is what it is to be at peace with God and to see his face. God, I pray that you would call upon hearts right now to hunger and thirst for your righteousness, to want to live rightly for you. For those that need to begin that process, I pray for courage to step out this morning. In Jesus' name.